Welcome to Retirement Decoded with your host, Scott Tucker, where we break down the complexities of retirement planning to give you clear, actionable advice. Whether you're just starting out or getting ready to retire, Scott's here to help you make informed decisions and secure your financial future. Tune in each week as we simplify the process and decode the path to a stress-free retirement. Now, here's your host, Scott Tucker.
Welcome back to the Retirement Decoded podcast with Scott Tucker. I'm your host, Scott Tucker. My trusty co-host, as almost always on the podcast, is Associate Advisor Andre Hootie. Say hello, Andre Hootie.
Hello, Andre Hootie.
Andre Hootie, we have a note from Paula on today's podcast episode. Paula says, Scott, I seek your wise counsel. Wise counsel?
Oh,
Question mark?
Well,
Why not? Paula says, Scott, I seek your wise counsel. This morning I received from Schwab a newsletter titled, quote, required minimum distributions, what's new in 2025? This you probably got this some time ago, Paula. I scanned through it and found this sentence, quote, if you have multiple tax-deferred retirement accounts, like IRAs, right, that sort of thing. If you have multiple tax-deferred retirement accounts, you must calculate required minimum distributions separately for each one, each IRA, let's say. And Andre, that's a new thing for 2025, isn't it?
it is, yeah.
Which is not new news, Paula. I don't know where your newsletter's been hiding, but thanks for raising this point. Because what used to happen, Andre, if you had two 401ks from a past job, you had to take an RMD from each 401k if you were no longer working at either place. And then if you were RMD eligible on two IRAs, you could take all of your required RMD just from one of the IRAs, and it would satisfy it for both.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I think what's led to this change now, the IRS is tired of trying to figure out how many IRAs folks have.
Yeah.
We have folks come to us, Andre, especially, sometimes we have couples come to us, and in between the two of them, they have 15 accounts.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd want that.
That just seems so complicated.
Well, I have two. We've had it where people have two old 401ks, an old 403b. She has two 457bs, and like Set Hut.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Seriously?
We actually have a gentleman that we have a radio show also in Chicagoland, and we have a gentleman who just became a client from that, and he's wondering why does he have 4 non-qualified accounts?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
It's kind of like a head scratcher. So one thing we do for folks is try to streamline things. So I think what you should try to do, if you do this yourself or you have another advisor, try to streamline things. When folks come to us and they have an advisor and they have 4 non-qualified accounts, a non-qualified account is not a retirement account. So most people call it a brokerage account. The proper term would be non-qualified, just to be a nitpicker and talk down to everybody. So we would rather streamline things. When you're 60 years of age and you have 10 accounts, do you want to be at 20 accounts 10 years later? Or maybe you have 10 accounts, 10 accounts at age 60, and maybe in a couple of years you got to be down to 3 or 4 accounts. Right. Just you can streamline when they're the same tax treatment, they can be streamlined. So Paula says, Scott, I seek your wise counsel. This morning I received, we already talked about that. So yeah, there's a new thing for 2025, or it was new. It's a little bit old now. You have to calculate your RMDs on your IRAs separately, which, it's still valid that you sent this to us, Paula, because wherever you found the newsletter finally, but it still is, useful information for 2025. Folks have to take their RMDs, and they need to know this, Paula. So thanks for sharing it, and thanks for putting up with me making fun of you. You do have to take the RMDs from each individual IRA.
Yeah, but all the more reason to consolidate and make that easier for yourself.
Make it easier. Yes, you don't have to do RMDs in 4 different IRAs. Scott, this has not been my understanding. My understanding was that you had to calculate your RMD based on the total value of the accounts, but could make your entire RMD from any of them. In any of them, Paul, that would be restricted to the IRA discussion. If you have multiple employer plans and you're not working, well, so here's the deal, Andre. You're still on the job somewhere with a 401k. You don't need to take the RMD if you're still on the job at that employer plan.
Mm-hmm.
But if say you're fully retired and you've got 2 401ks, you got to take an RMD from each of them. And then on the IRAs, the old rules were you could have a whole bunch of IRAs all over the place, and you could take an RMD from one of them to satisfy the RMD for all of them. But I think, Andre, the IRA is tired of trying to calculate all this stuff, and they're just going to say, hey, all these tax-deferred accounts, IRA, 401k, 403b, deferred comp, TSP, you got to take it out of all these accounts. Yeah, it's less work for the IRS.
Right. Well, less work for the IRS, but also less work for the person, right?
Well, if they get their stuff, in one sock.
Yeah, you would hope. In theory, it should be less work for the person.
I don't think it ever should have been. I think it's hard to administer this thing where you can take an RMD from one IRA and cover all of them. I think that's hard for one person to not screw up, but it's also hard for the IRS to monitor.
Yeah.
And I don't even believe in income taxes, but here we are. I pay my taxes because I don't want to go to prison.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a great way to I don't think we ought to be taxing work. We actually ought to tax sloth. I just don't know how we would do that. So the people who refuse to work, here's your tax.
Yeah, like can we make them go in debt like IOUs? No. Like when I get a job, this will be clear.
The problem is you can tax income quite easily, but you can't tax sloth. That's the whole problem.
It's just a country would be in a much different place if we taxed slothiness.
But then where would they get the money to pay the tax? That's the issue.
Well, I guess they would just print more like
sloth doesn't usually pay. Well, it can. They can pay in all kinds of free benefits. What was the thing she was saying? And then she says, "Did I miss something?" Question mark. No, Paula. In 2024, you're right. You could take your RMD completely out of one IRA and satisfy all the IRAs. The 401ks, you always had to take it out of each 401k separately. Just limiting the conversation to 401ks. And something that is still a law, though, that I don't want folks to miss, if you're still on the job and you're of RMD age, we have folks that are still working at 75 and they have a 401k at their current employer. You don't have to take an RMD out of there because you're still on the job. It's kind of a wrinkle that's kind of weird because if you're self-employed and you had a big SEP IRA, you could still put more money into the SEP IRA, but you would have an RMD because it's an IRA. Because it's not really an employer plan.
Right. It doesn't have that same structure as the 401k.
It's a wild, wacky world out there, Andre.
Yeah, it is.
You think about all that.
Overall, there's very few rules that I say I'm just really happy about, but this I think makes it a little bit easier. This way we don't have to, because one of the things I always hated keeping track of is where clients took their RMDs. Oh yeah, I took more out of this account, but that covered this account, and trying to keep that straight, year after year when you're 5 or 10 years like down the line, man, it is just tough. So consolidating, that makes things way easier on the person, on the client, but also us, just as the advisor. There's less accounts that we have to manage and
less mental gymnastics for everybody. Yeah. It used to be the case. There was a Secure Act 2.0 passed a year or two ago, and it used to be that a missed RMD had a federal penalty of 50% of the missed RMD, and it would be crazy. So say if your RMD was $10,000. You'd have to take the $10,000 RMD, but if you forgot to take it under the old law, the penalty for not taking it was $5,000, and then they made you go back and take the $10,000, and then they made you pay tax on the $10,000 to the IRS.
That's just, it's crazy to me because who's the most likely to forget?
Yeah, as you gain life experience, let's mess with the old people, right? Yeah. And now, so what I was going to get at, so a missed RMD penalty used to be 50% of the missed RMD. Then you had to go back, take the RMD, then you had to pay federal income tax on the RMD. And then that could cause taxation up to 85% of your Social Security. This is the reason why we don't like tax-deferred accounts like IRAs. We'd like to consider things like Roth conversions and other tax strategies. We could talk about it, tuckerretirement.com. Get in our phone calendar. We'll talk about it this week with you. But now the penalty for a missed RMD is quote unquote only 25%, Andre. So the Secure Act 2.0, our friends who aren't in Washington, they did us all a favor. They lowered the penalty for a missed RMD now to only 25%. So if you missed your $10,000, say if that's what it was, your RMD, you missed the $10,000 RMD, the penalty is only $2,500. Now you got to go back and take the $10,000, pay federal income tax on the $10,000 RMD. And that could cause up to that taxable income from your traditional IRA, we'll say, could cause federal taxation up to 85% of your Social Security. And then we wonder why people run out of money.
Yeah.
You're saying there are some of the, we help folks with financial planning for retirement, and we focus on folks who are 55 plus. And part of the reason why is because it's the most complicated, confusing, thing in the world. It's like you said, you're getting older, and what do? They make life more complicated. We're always trying to make life. You get to a point in your life where you think, okay, I've got this figured out. I'm an adult, and I know how everything works now, and I'm not confused like I was when I was a kid, or I didn't understand. When I was a kid, I didn't understand things like I'd buy a car when I'm 16 for my job. My mom goes, "Oh, we got to get it registered and insured." And I'm like, what do you mean registered? I bought it.
Right. Like, wasn't that enough?
No, you only have the title. Yeah, I got the title right here.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to go register it with the state. Okay, you got to tell the state I own it. Yeah, and then they put license plates on it. Okay, so I got license plates. Now you got to get insurance. Now you got to get insurance. Wait, to get insurance, I have to show I have a license plate, or to get a license plate, I had to show I have insurance. Vice versa. I can't remember the chicken or the egg. It was all crazy to me. When you're a kid, it doesn't make any sense. You're
right.
like I'm 16. I know how to bag groceries. That's the balance of my life skills are that I know how to bag groceries. When I was a kid, 1989, and when I was 16 years of age, they used to have Grocery Bagger College.
Really?
Schmidt's grocery store in Lansing, Michigan. They had 6 stores, and they had a training facility.
Oh, wow.
And you had to go to a day of training at the training facility, and they had like a conference room and all this stuff. And they had all these groceries all over this conference room table. And then they had the paper sacks. And these aren't the paper sacks like now if somebody goes to Whole Foods and they have the handles on them on those paper sacks. These are paper sacks like that, but with no handles. Like
a large, oversized, like sandwich bag kind of thing.
Well, Andre's a little younger than me, but they used to have grocery bags used to always be paper and never have handles.
Oh, see, I don't remember that.
There's no plastic bags. You just throw a bunch of stuff in a plastic bag and they just hand you a plastic bag, and they can do it in like 2 seconds. Right. We used to have to like structure the bag so no bag was too heavy, and that any of the bags. Here's what they did. So you have to show up for your training. And they're like, wear like dress shoes, dress pants, belt, dress shirt, a tie. And then you get there and they go, here, put this white apron on. And you have to tie on this like white apron. Like that's what you bag groceries on all day would be a dress shirt, tie, and an apron, all this stuff. See, this is nostalgia for the old days, Andre. And they would have you bag. They'd have you bag a bag. They'd show you how to bag a bag of groceries. Then they'd take it all apart and say, okay, now you do it. And you'd have to like put the cans in the bottom and so on. The heavier stuff on the bottom, the medium stuff in the middle, the bread on top. And none of the bags you would do could be very heavy because then some of the ladies the bags would be too heavy for them. Mm-hmm. Or you wouldn't want to have one bag be 15 pounds, another bag is 1 pound. That doesn't make any sense, right? And then what they would do is they would have this. It was 1989. I have PTSD about this stuff. Then you would bag the bag of groceries, and this is like your training thing. And they hired you, but if you don't do this, they can just can you.
Yeah. Like
Andre, you're too stupid to bag groceries. Get out of here. You're grocery bagging challenged. So they'd have you all this pressure. It sounds like when you're 16, it seems like some pressure. You got your little tie on and everything. And then you bag this bag of groceries, and they go, okay. And they go to the first kid's bag of groceries, and you didn't know this was going to be next. They pull out an X-Acto knife.
Oh no!
And they cut the corner of the bag away, and they go, now if anything falls,
what?
Yeah,
isn't everything going to fall?
No.
Apparently I don't.
They go to the actually I think they had one of the adults that taught us all this stuff. They used to bag groceries, but now the guy's like 40 or whatever.
Right, he's
like a store manager or something, And so that's actually how it worked. The guy goes and cuts his bag first, and everything's perfect and nothing moves. Oh, wow. They go to the first kid's, the first kid who like tucked his shirt in crooked, the kind of kid, they go cut his, and like there's like cans and all those boxes are all flying everywhere. And then, everybody's like, oh geez. And then they're like, okay, guys, let's try it again. They get rid of and it was all guys. There was no girls in this. Cause we used to have to do stuff like, I don't even know if they do this anymore there are no grocery baggers now, mostly. Not like it used to be. We'd have like 40 pound bags of salt, and you're 16 years old. And I'm like, I'm kind of strong at 16. Yeah, I was, but not like I am now, for a 16-year-old, that's kind of weird. And then a bag of salt is always that weird. It's like wrestling but I don't know if even dog food bags are that heavy anymore, but when it's a big sloshy bag of salt and you're like 16 years old, you're like, wow, this is pretty heavy for a bag of salt.
Yeah, seriously.
It's not like a plate that goes on the equipment in the gym. It's like it's a bag of salt.
Yeah, it moves around in your hands. It makes it impossible to hold on to.
So it seems like it's heavier than it is because it's cumbersome sometimes. But yeah, they had but then they're like, okay guys, let's try this again. So they throw all those paper bags away, they get new paper bags. And they go, okay, everybody bag it. So we're all bagging, like 6 of us down a line of conference room table, bagging all these groceries. And then they did it a couple times like that. They spent a few hours with us and kept cutting these bags until the stuff wasn't falling over. And they're like, okay, guys, you're ready for your first shift at Schmidt's, your local Schmidt's store. So I worked at the one at the northeast corner of Waverly and Saginaw, Lansing, Michigan. And it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, a grocery bagging school, huh? Who would have thought?
We had a, here's why you should always save for retirement. And this actually wasn't an older lady. This was a lady who's maybe 40. Sometimes we had incidents of shoplifting. We had a woman, she put a ham in her purse.
Oh my God. So how big was the purse, or how small was that?
How big was the woman? And she had a purse, and she put a whole ham in her purse, and we caught her doing that. There's another time this guy tried to, they used to have like this big cigarette display on one of the end caps near one of the registers. This guy went in there and he grabbed like 4 cartons of cigarettes and tried getting out the door. But then he ran into the manager, Pete, Pete was coming out of the manager's kind of bullpen that overlooks all the cashiers.
Uh-huh.
And Pete had both hands full of cash.
Oh,
no. So then the guy's like, and then they're going like, huh, 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 like to try to fake each other out.
Right.
And Pete's like, I was going to grab the guy, but he's got his hands full of cigarettes. I have my hands full of cash. And then the guy's looking at me like, look at all that cash. But then he's thinking, I really want to smoke. You know? And I don't even know what do cigarettes cost now? $1 million.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? Somebody, Natalie's dad told me the other day, he's a baby boomer, I guess. He's about 70. He said the other day, he doesn't smoke or anything, but he said the other day that cigarettes were like $18 a pack.
I believe it.
And I thought he was full of it. And then one day I was at a Walgreens buying some Benadryl for Natalie for allergies, whatever. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, I had to get in the cashier line, and the Walgreens in Mount Prospect, Elmhurst Road by Gulf, northwest suburbs of Chicago. For some reason, they had one cashier and like 10 people in line. And this is like a couple of days after he told me that people are paying $18 a pack of cigarettes. I think there's 20 cigarettes on a thing or whatever. I never smoke, so I'm a little fuzzy on this. So then I go, wait a minute. They had all the cigarettes behind the cashier. Because nowadays, everything at Walgreens has to be locked up or it's stolen. Mm-hmm. And then all the cigarettes are behind the cashier. And I don't normally go stand in the cashier line at Walgreens. So it was $18 a pack. And from my foggy memory from Schmidt's grocery store, Lansing, Michigan, so there'd be 10 packs in a carton. So a carton now would be $180 today. And then 4 cartons be $720.
Wow.
So the guy has now they're more expensive than they used to be, but imagine nowadays it's a big heist. 4 cartons of cigarettes, $720.
Yeah.
And then there's Pete, the grocery store manager, who's got fistful of cash coming out of the bullpen. Which nowadays
you have to do the math.
Well, nowadays the grocery store manager doesn't probably even have cash.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, very little.
They have. That's a good point.
But he had 2 big like fistful of cash. It was like those when the cash is all what they call it, manicured or banded or whatever, like from the bank. Mm-hmm. He was going to walk to one of the cashier's drawers, and some reason he didn't have the drawer. He actually had the cash. So he had like a stack of stacks and stacks of like 20s, 10s, 5s, whatever, and probably not 50s, probably 20 and below, which back then was like 40s and below or 50s and below, something like that. 40s. If you have a $40 bill, check us out at tuckerretirement.com. So Pete had 2 big fistfuls of cash, but then the guy on the other side has 4 cartons of cigarettes.
Right. So nowadays, Pete would really have to calculate which was more.
And they didn't have that stuff nowadays where you can't like tackle the guy who's trying to rob you. So Pete was like trying to head fake him, and then he's like, "Crap! I got all this cash in my hands," so he couldn't do anything because Pete would have tried. And then I was like 16, and I wasn't in the path. But the guy goes out the door with the cigarettes. And nowadays they have this stuff you can't chase anybody. Mm-hmm. I chased that car. He had like this guy with the 4 cartons of cigarettes. He had like a getaway car. Oh, there's a guy out there. He jumps in the guy's car. The guy starts driving away, and there's like an art van furniture store or something behind Schmidt's grocery store. And I'm out there with like my like dress shoes, dress pants, my shirt and tie, my apron, and I'm like in full sprint across this parking lot trying to get the license plate. And I come back and they're like, "Hey, Scotty, did you get the plate?" And I'm like, "Nah, Pete, it was too far. They got a little too far away, but they went northbound on Waverly and whatever." Right. And so that was nowadays they're like, "Oh, if you do that, you get fired."
Yeah, like what? You would think that they would have some respect, that hey, I tried to save the business.
Well. Yeah. Well, back then they did.
Well, yeah, back then.
Back then they're like, this guy plays hockey and it's full contact. He ain't taking any crap off these cigarette stealer.
Who needs a security guard? We got Scott. Send him.
Cigarette thieves. And so nowadays they have this thing where they like fire the people if they contest the what would that be? A larceny? It'd be a larceny, I do believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, not anymore. Not anymore. Nowadays, everything's upside down.
Depending on the state you're in, you can just walk out.
Cats and dogs living together.
Yeah.
Well, in Cook County, they have let's say lax enforcement, no matter who's in office. Yeah. Cook County State's Attorney, they vary on how much. One Cook County State's Attorney used to say you could steal up to $1,000, no prosecution. The new Cook County State's Attorney says you can steal up to $300, no prosecution.
So it's going to flip flop year to year. So just make sure you check your limits.
Check your local listings. At one point, it was you could go steal $999 of groceries. Then you could go to like the liquor store and you go steal $999 worth of liquor. Then you could go to the Best Buy and you could steal a $999 TV. Then you could go home and Super Bowl party.
Yes.
No prosecution.
Perfect.
Nowadays, it's like you can steal $299 at each store.
Teaching you how to save.
Smaller, teaching the kids how to save. Well, it's been fun and it's been real. Go ahead and like the podcast, share it. Get on our phone calendar at tuckerretirement.com. We'll spend 15 minutes for free with you over the telephone in the coming week and get your financial planning questions for retirement answered and your answers questioned. We'll talk to you in the next podcast episode of Retirement Decoded with Scott Tucker.
Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. has a strategic partnership with tax professionals and attorneys who can provide tax and or legal advice. Neither the firm nor its agents or representatives may give tax or legal advice. Individuals should consult with a qualified professional for guidance before making any purchasing decisions. A Roth conversion is a taxable event and may have several tax-related consequences. Be sure to consult with a qualified tax advisor before making any decisions regarding your IRA. The views and opinions herein are those of Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of AE Wealth Management, LLC. Investment advisory services made available through AE Wealth Management, LLC. AEWM and Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. are not affiliated companies. Insurance products are offered through the insurance business Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. is an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. are not subject to investment advisory requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing carrier. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc. is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during this podcast shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Scott Tucker Solutions, Inc.